James Gunn's Superman is set to soar into theaters on July 11th, 2025, marking the official beginning of the new DC universe. And while we're all excited to see David Corenswet don the cape, recent reports suggest this movie might be packing more villains than a Comic-Con costume contest. But here's the million-dollar question. Is cramming multiple villains into a single Superman film a bold creative choice? Or a recipe for disaster that could tank the entire DCU before it even gets off the ground? Today, we're breaking down the villain problem that's haunted superhero movies for decades, why Superman deserves better, and what's at stake for James Gunn's ambitious new universe. Buckle up, because we're about to explore why sometimes less is definitely more. Before we dive into the dangers, let's talk about what we know about Gunn's Superman and its impressive, perhaps too impressive, villain lineup. James Gunn himself has confirmed that the main villain of Superman is, shockingly, Lex Luthor, with Nicholas Hoult taking on the iconic role. That sounds great on paper. Lex Luthor is Superman's greatest nemesis, a brilliant billionaire who represents everything Superman stands against. But here's where things get complicated. Lex isn't flying solo in this adventure. We've got Maria Gabriela de Faria playing Angela Spica, aka the Engineer, a character who can interface with technology thanks to nanites in her bloodstream and sports a liquid metal body that can shapeshift and manipulate electricity. Then, there's the mysterious figure known as the Hammer of Boravia, a new villain created specifically for this film who apparently has beef with Superman over his intervention in an international conflict. The trailer also shows us Ultraman, a black-suited figure who could be either the evil Earth 3 version of Superman or possibly Bizarro in disguise. Plus, we have Sarah Sampaio as Eve Tessmacher, Lex's assistant, and Terrence Rosemore as Otis Berg, Lex's right-hand henchman. And if that wasn't enough, the film features a massive fire-breathing kaiju monster that Superman battles in the skies of Metropolis. That's potentially 6 different antagonistic forces in one movie. Now, Superman has one of the greatest rogues galleries in comic book history. Lex Luthor represents the intellectual and philosophical challenge. Brainiac tests his compassion for all life. General Zod forces him to choose between his heritage and his home. Each of these villains brings out a different aspect of Superman's character, which is exactly why they work so well individually. But when you try to squeeze multiple major threats into a single film, something's gotta give. And unfortunately, that something is usually character development, emotional stakes, and narrative focus. Which brings us to our next point. Let's take a trip down memory lane to examine some of the most infamous examples of superhero movies that bit off more than they could chew in the villain department. Think of this as our cautionary tale section, because those who don't learn from Hollywood's mistakes are doomed to repeat them. First up, we have Spider-Man 3 from 2007, which is basically the granddaddy of villain overload disasters. Sam Raimi originally wanted to focus on Sandman and Harry Osborn's New Goblin, creating a personal story about friendship, betrayal, and redemption. But producer Avi Arad forced the director to include Venom as well. And suddenly, what should have been a focused character study became a 3-ring circus. The result? Critics called it a disjointed mess that tried to do too much at once. Despite this, the movie still broke box office records with a $151.1 million opening weekend, proving that sometimes even bad movies can make money in the short term. But here's the kicker. That poor reception led directly to the Spider-Man franchise being rebooted entirely. You'd think Sony learned their lesson from Spider-Man 3, but apparently not, because they made the exact same mistake with The Amazing Spider-Man 2 in 2014. This time, they crammed in Electro, Green Goblin, and Rhino, while also setting up the Sinister Six for future films. The movie was so concerned with building a shared universe that it forgot to tell a coherent story about the character we actually came to see. Then, we have Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice from 2016, which featured Batman and Superman as adversaries, plus Lex Luthor as the mastermind, Doomsday in the final act, parademons in dream sequences, and even teases of a Joker who hadn't appeared yet. The movie was so busy setting up future films that it nearly collapsed under its own weight. Even going further back, we have Batman and Robin from 1997, where Arnold Schwarzenegger's Mr. Freeze, Uma Thurman's Poison Ivy, and a woefully mischaracterized Bane made the film a cartoonish disaster. Each villain felt like they belonged in a different movie entirely, creating a tonal mess that killed the Batman franchise for nearly a decade. And lest we think this is just a DC problem,
allow me to break the ice.
Even Marvel fell into this trap with Iron Man 2 in 2010, trying to balance both Justin Hammer and Whiplash as antagonists. Neither got enough development, making it one of the weaker entries in the MCU's early phase. The pattern becomes clear. When superhero movies try to cram in multiple villains, they usually end up with underdeveloped characters, convoluted plots, and disappointed fans. But this raises an important question. So if history has taught us that multiple villains are usually a bad idea, why do studios keep doing it? It's like watching someone repeatedly touch a hot stove and act surprised when they get burned each time. The first reason is what I like to call the more is better mentality. Studio executives often think that more villains equal more excitement, more action, and more spectacle. It's like the cinematic equivalent of supersizing your meal at McDonald's. Sometimes you just end up feeling sick instead of satisfied. There's this persistent belief in Hollywood that bigger automatically means better, but as we've seen time and again, bigger often just means messier. Then there's what I call sequel setup syndrome. Modern studios are absolutely obsessed with building cinematic universes, and they want to introduce multiple villains to set up future films, spin-offs, and team-up movies. This was particularly evident in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which was more concerned with teasing the Sinister Six movie that never happened than telling a complete story about the web-slinger we actually paid to see. There's also the fan service overload factor. Studios try to please comic book fans by cramming in as many Easter eggs and characters as possible, thinking that quantity will make up for quality. But here's the thing. Most real fans would rather see one villain done really well than 3 villains done poorly. Finally, there's the spectacle trap. In an era where superhero movies are competing with video games and streaming for attention, there's pressure to create something that feels bigger and more impressive. More villains means more CGI battles, more explosions, more epic moments that look great in trailers, but don't necessarily add up to a satisfying story. But here's what makes all of this even more problematic when it comes to Superman specifically. Superman presents unique challenges that make the multiple villain problem even more dangerous than it is for other superheroes. Understanding these challenges is crucial to grasping why this character needs a more focused approach. Let's start with what I call the power problem. Superman is virtually invincible. He can move planets, travel faster than light, and survive nuclear explosions. So how do you create meaningful stakes when your hero is essentially a god? The answer isn't to throw more threats at him until something sticks. The answer is to find the right threat that challenges him on multiple levels, physically, emotionally, and morally. This connects directly to what makes Superman truly compelling, his moral compass. Superman's greatest strength isn't his ability to punch through mountains. It's his unwavering commitment to doing the right thing, even when it's difficult or costly. The best Superman stories challenge his ideals, force him to make impossible choices, and explore what it means to be a symbol of hope in a cynical world. Lex Luthor is perfect for this because he represents everything Superman opposes: cynicism disguised as pragmatism, selfishness masked as enlightened self-interest, and the corruption of brilliance for petty personal gain. When done right, Lex forces Superman to confront the limits of idealism and the dangers of absolute power. But if you dilute that philosophical conflict with multiple other villains, you lose the moral core of what makes Superman interesting. Then there's the relatability factor, which is probably Superman's biggest challenge in modern cinema. One of the most persistent criticisms of the character is that he's too perfect or too powerful to be relatable to modern audiences. The key to making him compelling isn't to make him more violent or conflicted. It's to find those human moments that remind us why Clark Kent matters as much as Superman. These moments might include Clark struggling with his dual identity, Superman questioning whether his intervention actually helps, or dealing with the weight of responsibility. But when you overcrowd the story with multiple villains, you lose precious screen time for those crucial character moments that make Superman more than just a god in a cape. Now let's talk about James Gunn specifically and why the stakes are so incredibly high for this particular film. Understanding what's riding on Superman's success makes the multiple villain concern even more pressing. James Gunn has proven himself to be a master of character-driven storytelling, which gives us reason for optimism. The Guardians of the Galaxy films turned obscure comic characters into beloved household names. The Suicide Squad in 2021 managed to balance multiple characters effectively while still telling a coherent story with real emotional weight. Gunn knows how to find the heart in seemingly ridiculous concepts. But here's the crucial difference that everyone seems to be overlooking. Guardians of the Galaxy and the Suicide Squad are ensemble films by design. They're supposed to be about teams of characters working together and becoming more than the sum of their parts. Superman, on the other hand, is supposed to be a character study about one man trying to balance his alien heritage with his human upbringing. The pressure on this film is unlike anything Gunn has faced before. The new DCU is starting fresh after the mixed reception of the previous DCEU. This Superman film isn't just launching a character, it's launching an entire universe that DC Studios hopes will compete with the Marvel Cinematic Universe for the next decade. Whether we like it or not, every DC film gets compared to what Marvel has accomplished, and Marvel found success by starting simple. Iron Man had one main villain in Obadiah Stane. Thor had Loki. Captain America had Red Skull. They built complexity over time, not all at once, allowing audiences to get invested in individual characters before throwing them into massive team-up scenarios. There's also the weight of fan expectations. Superman fans have been waiting for a truly great Superman film since 1978's Superman, the movie. Man of Steel was divisive, Batman v Superman tried to do too much, Justice League satisfied almost no one. The pressure to deliver something special is enormous, and the temptation to throw everything at the wall must be overwhelming. But throwing everything at the wall is exactly the wrong approach for Superman, which brings us to some concerning warning signs. But let's also look at what actually works in superhero cinema to understand the contrast. The most obvious red flag is the ensemble cast. The film features multiple superheroes beyond Superman, Guy Gardner as Green Lantern, Hawkgirl, Mr. Terrific, and Metamorpho. While this could work, it means screen time is divided among many characters who each need development. There's also the Authority connection. The Engineer is a member of the Authority, who are getting their own DCU movie later. This raises concerns that Superman might be more focused on setting up future films than telling its own story. The inclusion of a kaiju monster alongside human villains suggests the film might be covering too many different types of threats. But let's contrast this with what actually works. The Dark Knight focused almost entirely on the Joker as the primary antagonist, creating one of the greatest superhero films ever made. Yes, Harvey Dent becomes Two-Face, but his transformation is part of the Joker's larger plan. One cohesive story with clear conflict between order and chaos. Iron Man kept it beautifully simple. Tony Stark versus Obadiah Stane. One clear villain, one personal betrayal, one emotional journey about learning responsibility. Black Panther built its entire narrative around T'Challa versus Killmonger, using this central conflict to explore themes of tradition versus progress. Even looking at Superman's own history, Superman the movie from 1978 focused on Lex Luthor as the primary antagonist. The story was fundamentally about the battle between Superman's idealism and Luthor's cynicism, a conflict that still resonates today.
I'm gonna make this pencil disappear.
The pattern is clear. The best superhero movies focus on one central antagonist and use that conflict to explore the hero's character. They understand that depth beats breadth, that one well-developed villain is infinitely more compelling than three half-baked ones. If Superman falls into the multiple villain trap and fails to connect with audiences, the consequences could extend far beyond just one disappointing movie. We're looking at a potential domino effect that could reshape the superhero landscape. Let's start with the DCU's future. Superman is being positioned as the true beginning of this new shared continuity. If it fails to connect with audiences, it could doom projects like The Authority, Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, and The Brave and the Bold before they even get off the ground. There's also James Gunn's reputation to consider. He's coming off massive successes with Guardians and The Suicide Squad. A failure here could damage his credibility and make studios less willing to take creative risks. More importantly, it could make other talented filmmakers hesitant to take on superhero projects. Superman's cinematic legacy is also at stake. The character has struggled to find his footing in modern cinema, and this new interpretation needs to prove that Superman can still be relevant for contemporary audiences. If this film fails, it might be decades before anyone else gets the chance to try again. We can't ignore the broader context of superhero fatigue either. Audiences are becoming increasingly selective about superhero content, and they're getting better at recognizing when studios prioritize franchise building over storytelling. A poorly received Superman film could contribute to the growing sense that the genre has run out of things to say. Perhaps most importantly, this could affect how Hollywood approaches superhero storytelling going forward. If Superman fails due to too many villains, it might convince studios that bigger is better doesn't work. But if it succeeds despite being overstuffed, it could encourage even more bloated superhero films. So how can James Gunn and DC Studios navigate these treacherous waters and avoid the multiple villain trap? The good news is that there are proven strategies that could save the day. The most important thing they can do is trust in their stated choice of Lex Luthor as the main villain. Since Gunn has confirmed this, they should lean into it completely and make the other antagonists subordinate to Lex's plan or secondary threats that don't distract from the central conflict. They should use their villains as reflections of different aspects of Superman's character, rather than treating each one as an independent threat. Lex could represent the corruption of brilliance. The Engineer could represent technological dehumanization. The Hammer of Baravia could represent unintended consequences of intervention. But each should serve Superman's character journey, not their own agenda. Most importantly, they need to trust in the core concept. Gunn has said this will focus on Superman reconciling his alien heritage with his human upbringing. That's a rich enough foundation for any story, and it doesn't need multiple villain subplots to be compelling. There's tremendous power in embracing simplicity. Sometimes the most powerful stories are the simplest ones. Superman saves people, inspires hope, stands for truth and justice. These aren't outdated concepts, they're timeless themes that resonate just as strongly today. Finally, they need to learn from decades of examples, showing what doesn't work. There's no shame in studying other people's mistakes and choosing not to repeat them. The film industry has given us a masterclass in what happens when superhero movies try to do too much at once. Look, I want James Gunn's Superman to succeed just as much as anyone watching this video. The man has proven time and again that he can handle complex characters and emotional storytelling while still delivering the spectacle that audiences expect. But the history of superhero cinema is littered with good intentions and overstuffed scripts that collapsed under their own weight. Superman doesn't need a parade of villains to be compelling. He doesn't need multiple philosophical conflicts happening simultaneously. What he needs is one great story that reminds us why we believed a man could fly in the first place and why that still matters in 2025. The film is set to explore Superman as he reconciles his alien Kryptonian heritage with his human upbringing. That's a story worth telling, and it's compelling enough to carry an entire movie without needing to throw in every villain from the comics. James Gunn, if you're somehow watching this, we believe in you. Sometimes, the most heroic thing you can do as a filmmaker is show restraint. Sometimes, the most powerful choice is the simple one. And sometimes, the best way to launch a universe is to tell one perfect story instead of trying to tell 6 adequate ones. What do you think? Are you worried about the multiple villain situation, or do you trust James Gunn to pull it off? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the world of superheroes. Until next time, true believers, remember that with great power comes great responsibility, and sometimes that responsibility is knowing when to say no to that 5th villain.